Hi, I'm Richard Rose, and welcome back to Focus. We're here with our guests, Nassau legislators, both Democrats, Wayne Wink and Kevan Abrahams. Wayne representing Roslyn and Kevan representing Hempstead, and talking about whether or not the state should take over Nassau County's finances. It's been done before under the Galata administration when we had this agency created, the Nassau Interim Finance Authority, known as NIFA. It has a control board, and right now everybody, all the lawyers in Mineola, kind of wondering, does it get activated again? What triggers it, Wayne, whether or not it should be?
Well, the statute, the state law that would trigger it is if there is a documented 1% deficit, and by 1% that amounts to about $26 million, or if there is a 1% deficit that is imminent. And that is what's part of the interpretation of NIFA as to whether or not certain things cause an imminent deficit. So that's really where I think we are at the moment, is their determination on whether or not there's an imminent deficit.
You know, just off the top of my head, I would think that if it was only 1% deficit, everybody cheer in Mineola, wouldn't it? It was considered to be quite worse, much worse than that, right?
Right. Well, yeah, obviously, I mean, as it was pointed out earlier, $61 million in labor savings.
That's 2.5% right there.
That's right there. That's, and then you add on to the fact $20+ million in state initiatives that's not going to come through. Right. And then there's a whole bunch of other smaller items that have been budgeted for savings, which you don't know if they're going to materialize. But right then and there, you're well over $80 million, and not knowing what sales tax is going to bring in, with the economy being the way it's going to be, you're looking at an uncertain future. And
one of the things that I mentioned at the top here is that this has happened before under the Galata administration, who was lambasted for, basically wasting, largesse and not wanting to tell the people the truth about whether or not they should have tax increases to make it look good. And that was the mentality of how his administration was treated for allowing the county to be taken over by the state in the first place. And yet here we are again.
Right. What NIFA came in as was a monitoring board that had teeth. They could reject the budget. They could kick it back to the legislature and to the county executive to resubmit. So they weren't formally a control board, but they had a lot more real power at the time. Much of that phased out over a period of years. But they're still at the point where they have oversight capabilities, where they can give their opinions on things. They've given opinions on the level of borrowing and things of that nature, which they've been very critical of. But they still have that wild card of becoming a full-blown control board.
Yeah, can they even stop the county from, or can they actually stop the county from borrowing to pay for the tax refunds that are so controversial?
Oh, absolutely.
They can say you can't do that. Not
only that, they from our understanding of the terminology in the statute, they can actually stop and freeze wages from all our unions, our collective bargaining unions, freeze all our collective bargaining agreements.
Right now?
Well, as soon as they morph into a control board.
Right.
Now, now they're currently, like Wayne had mentioned, they're more of an oversight board, which gives obviously their opinion and has the ability to approve or disapprove from the budgets. But if they morph into a control board, absolutely.
Morph. Wow, this sounds frightening. Almost,
yeah, we've gotten into science fiction. That's
science fiction. Well, but we got to do it the fact, right? And so, I mean, how does that even happen? It seems like there's confusion about who makes that decision.
Well, what's happening right now is that NIFA is in a position where they've hired attorneys. In fact, they've hired Skadden Arps, one of the biggest law firms in the world, and in particular, they've hired Judith Kaye, the former chief judge of the Court of Appeals of the state of New York.
That seems odd. That's the state hiring an attorney to figure out what it should do, what its own agency should do. Is that essentially
how it gets from here to there? Yeah, there's unfortunately there are a lot of details involved, and what triggers what powers do they have, what responsibilities do they have. Much of that has to be determined as they're moving along. And I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to put the cart before the horse. Well, they're trying to put the proper order in place so that when they do come in, or if they do come in, they come in fully secure in the knowledge of what their powers are and what they need to do in order to make things right.
Hey, Kevan, the politics of this is a little bit confounding, too. We had Andrew Cuomo appearing with Ed Mangano last year, and I think the Republican Ed Mangano, county executive, is on the transition team, I believe, for Andrew Cuomo, and now moves to take over as governor of New York State. He's a Democrat. And it was reported that I think both of you gentlemen actually had to leave the room when Mangano appeared with Andrew Cuomo.
Well, I did, but
you had to leave the room because
it seems to be ancient history at this
Wayne
point.
was disliked a little bit more.
All right, but that just shows you. Here's the Cuomo is the leader of your party, the Democratic Party, and you have to leave the room so that he can appear with Ed Mangano. And then he was quoted as saying, and is that accurate, by the way?
To an extent. I mean, who asked me to leave and why, can be the subject for historical reference. But at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is that, the governor's coming in. The governor has a mandate to get the state's fiscal house in order. The state is facing the potential of a $10 billion deficit for this coming year. $10
billion now.
$10 billion. And seemingly growing by the day. I mean, as inaction continues to breed inaction, that number only seems to get bigger. So that's the state's problem. At the same time, the state sees not only Nassau County, but I'm sure other municipalities throughout the state that are having more and more difficulty with either mandated costs or pension contributions or things of that nature. And the state is going to have to make a decision on whether or not they're going to intervene on behalf of their municipalities or whether they're going to leave the municipalities to fend for themselves.
Well, Kevan, that's the question that we were rounding up to, is that the Governor-elect Cuomo was quoted as saying, let Ed Mangano, a Republican, give him some time to try and sort the situation out. What do you think of that statement from Cuomo?
Well, I mean, and the governor is definitely entitled to say that. I think from NYFA's standpoint, what they're bringing up as questions, which are truly valid, are not just things that they brought up in the last couple of weeks. Definitely not since the November elections have been completed. All these things are things that NYFA has been asking about, how the county was going to manage its responsibilities going back to January, February of this year, when the county executive chose to make some changes to the budget as it currently was constituted when we passed it in 2009 for 2010. So from that standpoint, they're asking things as nothing's new. Obviously, everybody knows the same issues that center around sales tax, that are centered around pension costs, mandated costs. These are all the same issues in every county. They're universal. From our standpoint, there should be clear-cut answers. The county executive has touted labor savings for the last 6 to 7 months that we're in negotiations, that we're going to be able to get these savings. Not one dime has been accrued. Now, it's in our best interest for the county executive to succeed. No one, and I think Wayne would agree, no one wants to see a control board come in because obviously the control board starts to have an oversight and teeth in regards to managing what we do as legislators on a daily basis.
Well, that is actually the question we're going to take up in our next segment. Should there be a control board? What are the consequences if one is declared? We'll talk about that when we continue with our guests right here on Focus. Stay with us.